sandwiches, ice cream, coffee and snacks, and many other pleasing treats. Our foods are fresh and tasty, our drinks satisfying and refreshing. They're so good.
Welcome to Average Joe's Drive-In.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to Average Joe's Drive-In, episode number 50. I'm at that halfway to 100, which is kind of amazing. So, with me is my good friend, Pete Farrar.
Yo.
So, this is a new special monthly segment Pete and I will be doing where we pick a topic to talk about, and then we kind of have like a month to watch the films or kind of re-familiar ourselves with them. So we decided for the first one to do something that's near and dear to our heart, and that's canon films.
Yes. We love canon films.
You know, canon films is... It's... anybody that grew up in the 80s, early 90s, even probably late 70s was inundated with canon films.
Yeah.
Because, you know, living in rural Maine, we didn't get to go to the theater a whole lot. So we, you know, when the video store era kind of took over is when we started getting a chance to see a lot of movies. If it wasn't on like cable TV, like TNT or TBS, and which a lot of these films were. A lot of these films were.
Basic cable.
On basic cable, exactly. But, you know, the video store rentals, because Canon pumped out just an asinine amount of films. And they were basically, a good chunk of them were pretty much direct-to-video fodder.
Well, a lot of the video stores had a lot of these movies because they were cheap.
Right.
And they could buy them and rent them, and they didn't have to pay a lot of money. It wasn't like a Paramount or 20th Century Fox. And a lot of these stores had tons of canon films, just tons of them. It was great. Just rows of cheese.
Rows of cheese with amazing covers that had nothing to do with the films.
Right.
90% of them, which was a lot of 80s video store rentals.
You bring it home and be like, this is going to be awesome. Oh, this sucks.
Pretty much. Especially on the sci-fi and fantasy stuff was always like, oh yeah, no, not so much. But you know, you still loved them. Whether it was canon or not, that was like an 80s movies thing anyway. It was just the covers that had nothing to do with the films. And the other thing is, for those of you that are too young to remember the glory of video stores, the other thing is movies were stupidly expensive because a lot of these film companies, they wouldn't even let you have, you couldn't buy the tapes off them. What they would do is they would give people the tapes and they rented them out, and I believe they got a percentage of the rentals, or you basically, the rental companies rented it off the big companies. So Canon Films, from what I remember, was maybe one of the first companies, I think, that started actually selling tapes and stuff, because some of the first movies I remember being able to buy,
I did not know that,
were Canon Films. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but
pretty sure I never bought a Canon film in my life.
I own several, but that's beside the point. So, you know, really, but as I wrote, you know, we have all kinds of cool fun facts about canon films and little tidbits about some of the movies we're going to talk about. But like most kids from Maine in the late 80s and early 90s, canon films were a video store HBO staple for us. They were notoriously low budget and bad, but for us, they were our go-to for cheap entertainment. They had everything a teenage boy could want. Copious amounts of violence, nudity, and bad language. There were
movies.
Yeah, lots of movies. There were these films were often done on shoestring budgets, and more often than not, weren't well thought out or frankly all that good. But we sure as hell found them entertaining. With this in mind, we present our top 5 favorite canon films of all time. So we're each going to give a top 5. So what we're going to do is, we didn't really discuss this ahead of time, but we're each going to give a film that's, you know, from top 5 up. So seeing Pete's the guest, Pete, why don't you go with your number 5 top favorite
My
canon
number
film.
5.
Your number 5, yeah.
Well, I didn't watch 5. I only watched 4. And I barely got through the 4th one because it angered me so much. So we're gonna start. We're gonna start at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom here. And my number 4/5, whatever you want to call it, it's so bad it takes up 2 spaces, 2 slots. Masters of the Universe.
Oh, God.
And I remembered the movie being horrible back whenever it was released in the theater, and I actually think I did go see it in the theater, come to think of it. But I can't confirm or deny that. I'll have to ask my brother Tim, because I think he went with me. But
I actually watched this not that long ago.
Started watching this the other day, and I made it about 20 minutes in, and I skimmed through it. It's just, I can't find anything good to say about this movie, except for it sucks that bad.
Well, I mean, it's pretty much notoriously known as basically one of the films that sunk canon films. It was so bad.
I can't believe it didn't sink Dolph Lundgren. That, jeez.
Well, I mean, you know what? I think it took him 15 years to really kind of sort of come back, and with, you know, like the Expendables. But yeah, I mean, I remember that film being notoriously bad, and out of sheer boredom, I think it was last year sometime I watched it. And I'm a big fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000, so I basically was watching it with that mindset. Because
I was
like
angry.
10 minutes into it, I was just like, holy shit, this is awful. Now, you know, just to give you guys a little heads up, our top 5 films may not necessarily be good.
Right.
This is our top 5, basically based on our memory from growing up and the films we loved. So you got to kind of take, you know, when we say top 5, don't think Jaws or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You know,
these are canon films.
So yeah, you know, a canon 5 is like a Steven Spielberg 8 or 9,
20
or 20.
I don't even think you can. No, I don't think he's even comparable. But Masters of the Universe, the first thing that just drove me nuts is the horrible matte painting of Castle Grayskull. It actually looked, I think the cartoon Masters of the Universe, the Castle Grayskull on there, looked better than this matte painting that looked like a cartoon comic book cover. It was bad. And then I was just like, okay. And the other thing that just drove me nuts, well, it didn't drive me nuts, but I actually laughed out loud on this, was the beginning credits was such a rip-off of Richard Donner, of Superman, the movie. You know, how the titles come flying in, and, you know, the credits, and it was that, only done really badly in rainbow colors. And it was so much like a rip-off of Star Wars in the sense of some of the opening scenes and the way the scenes were shot, and, you know, it's like Darth Vader coming down the hall of the, you know, the Ten of Five in the beginning of A New Hope, and that was the same thing as Skeletor walking into the throne room, and it's like, you have no idea what's going on. Who are these people? Who's this old lady in a force field? Who they call her the sorceress, but I don't know who she is. There's no backstory. It's just this guy that has a face that kind of looks like a skull is there, and he took over, and they're looking for some guy called He-Man. So if you had no idea what this movie was about, you're screwed from the get-go. If you didn't know Masters of the Universe.
Well, this is the funny thing. And I actually didn't know this, but there's a excellent show on Netflix if you grew up in the 80s called The Toys That Made Us. And on their He-Man episode, they were talking about the fact that there basically was no characters from the He-Man universe in the movie He-Man other than He-Man.
And Skeletor.
And Skeletor. All the other characters that are in that movie, they turned into toys after the fact. And this was in like the later stages of He-Man when it was kind of getting ready to die anyway. So Yeah, it really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, but then again, this is canon films we're talking about. So,
special effects were horrible. Acting was horrible. Everything was. There was nothing good about this movie. Billy Barty, maybe, but his character. It was just the writing was just dialogue. Nothing about this movie was good, and I can't believe it made as much money as it did.
I think it was like morbid curiosity.
I think they got the Masters of the Universe crowd and the kids. Oh, He-Man, Masters of the Universe, and then they saw it and was like, oh, movie
shit!
Sucks.
We spent money on
this.
Sucks.
And I don't remember it being that bad though. But then again, I haven't watched it since it came out originally. So I might have watched it twice, 30 years ago, and no. Couldn't do it. Couldn't finish the movie. So,
yeah,
big thumbs down.
This is a way to start it off. So this is another thing. If you want to find some interesting shit out about canon films, there is a movie. It's called Electric Boogaloo: The Wild Untold Story of Canon Films, and it is amazing.
It's a great documentary.
A really good documentary. One of my favorites from the past couple of years. So. Track that down if you can. I'm not sure if it's still available on Netflix or not. I know it was, but, I digress. Anyway, my number 5 film is 1989's Cyborg, directed by Albert Puyen, 86 minutes, rated R, stars Jean-Claude Van Damme, Deborah Richter, Vincent Klein. I watched it on Blu-ray. So,
you bought a Blu-ray.
I bought a Blu-ray of Cyborg. It was cheap. For a reason. In a future beset by chaos and violence, mercenary Gibson Rickenbacker is charged with a mission that could change everything, protecting beautiful cyborg Pearl Prophet. She holds the cure for a deadly disease that could destroy humanity and must get it to the scientist in Atlanta. But warlord Tremolo Fender...
I'm telling.
Fearing that his power will be undercut by peace, intends to make sure she never reaches her destination.
I own a Gibson and a Fender. One of them has a tremolo, but I don't own a Rickenbacker.
I can't tell you how many times I watched this one growing up. It was one of my go-to movies for a long time. I had this one on DVD at one point or the other, but since then I don't think I've seen it, so it'd been a while since my last viewing. I'll be honest, this one has not held up well. Sure, I still enjoyed the hell out of it, but man, there are a lot of glaring issues. There were parts when the Foley noises didn't line up with what was going on, horribly cheesy bad dialogue, bad acting, and plot holes that you could drive a truck through. It's weird how sometimes when you go a long while without viewing a film, those things become glaringly apparent when you see it again. Either you become used to them and just accept it for what it was, or you didn't even realize it. At the heart of it, I still enjoy this one, but I didn't feel the same as I once did, and that's kind of a bummer. Even with the new revelation, this will stay on my list of favorite canon films, simply out of nostalgia. But certainly has moved down. One thing I did notice I'd never picked up on was the names of the main characters are named after musical companies, instruments, or parts. I found that kind of funny. Why that never done on me before, I have no idea. My rating was a 4.5 out of 10. IMDb rating was a 5 out of 10. And I have some fun facts, and I took these fun facts from Wikipedia. Canon Films initially intended to make a sequel to the 1987 He-Man film, Masters of the Universe, and a live-action Spider-Man film. Both projects were planned to be shot simultaneously by Albert Puyen. Canon, however, was in financial trouble and had to cancel deals with both Mattel and Marvel Entertainment Group, the owners of He-Man and Spider-Man, respectively. Canon had already spent $2 million on costumes and sets for both films and decided to start a new project to recoup the money spent on them. Puyen wrote the story for Cyborg in one weekend. He had Chuck Norris in mind for the lead, but co-producer Mannheim Golem cashed Jean-Claude Van Damme. The film was shot for less than $500,000 and was filmed in 23 days. The film was entirely shot in Wilmington, North Carolina. After the success of Bloodsport, Cannon Films offered Jean-Claude Van Damme the lead in Delta Force 2, American Ninja 3, or Cyborg. He chose the latter, although he later admitted, "I didn't like the film so much." Several of the characters' names, as we mentioned, are referenced to well-known manufacturers and models of guitars and other musical instruments. Gibson Rickenbacker, which is Gibson and Rickenbacker. Fender Tremolo, Fender and a tremolo arm. Marshall Strat,
Marshall Strat, I like that.
Marshall Amplifiers and Fender Stratocaster. Les, Gibson Les Paul. Pearl Prophet, Pearl Drums, Prophet 5 synthesizer, and Nady Simmons, Nady Systems Incorporated, and Simmons Electric Drums.
Nady Simmons.
So, yeah, there was, that's some fun facts about Cyborg.
Yep, I'm going to start calling myself Marshall Fender. That's my porn name. Marshall Fender.
So what is your number 4? Do you have anything to add about Cyborg?
No, I don't remember too much of it. I'm going to have to watch it again eventually. Someday, I'm sure I will. I think
the first Van Damme movie I really remember.
Yeah, me too. I didn't watch that, but I did watch Masters of the Universe. And all I can think of is those cheesy models of them on those little flying discs where they didn't move at all. They were just like little statues. And they
really bad green screening before.
I did better green screening back in the 70s with my brother on a Super 8 camera than that movie. It's that bad.
So, skipping on to your number... Well, you don't have a number 4, so why don't I just do my number 4?
Do your number 4.
All right. My number 4 is also a film that Pete has on his, so we're going to get to talk about this. That is 1986's Cobra.
Yes.
Directed by George P. Cosmatos, runtime 87 minutes, rated R, stars Sylvester Stallone, Brigitte Nielsen, Rennie Santoni. I watched that on VHS. Los Angeles policeman Lieutenant Marion Cobra Cobretti finds himself at the center of a spate of murders carried out by a secret society called New Order, which was also a musical group. Killers who select weak members of society for extermination. As the murder rate rises, Cobra takes model Ingrid into protective custody after she witnesses New Order's leader in action. As Cobra falls for Ingrid, they find shelter in a small town, but must soon fight for survival. This one is straight out of the Cannon's film vault. If you're unfamiliar with who or what Cannon Films was all about, again, I highly suggest the excellent documentary Electric Boogaloo, The Wild Untold Story of Cannon Films. This is straight up 80s action movie cheese at its finest. In a nutshell, it represents pretty much what Cannon Films were known for, cheesy but entertaining films. I hadn't seen this one since the HBO days when I was growing up. Like a good chunk of Cannon Films, this borders on being just painfully bad, but manages to be entertaining. There are cheesy 80s catchphrases and one-liners. Loads of over-the-top violence. For those of you in the know, see what I did there?
Right.
And plenty of corny, bad dialogue. It was everything I was in the mood for. A nostalgic, blissful walk down memory lane, accompanied by a perfect unknown 80s soundtrack. I think there was a John Cafferty song in there, which half of Stallone's movies had a John Cafferty song. But the best part of their films, 99% of the time you know what you're getting going in. Once in a while, I get in those moods where these types of movies are just what I want. Sometimes it's fun just to sit back and go with the flow. When the mood strikes and I want cheesy 80s nostalgia by the bucket load, I pop in something like Cobra. Also, it's a lot of fun picking out all the actors you recognize from other films, many of them Cannon Films staples. This came out during the peak of Stallone mania. It's fun to revisit some of his lesser-known ones and love films he put out in the 80s, early 90s. My rating was a 5 out of 10. The IMDb rating was a 5.7 out of 10. Some fun facts on this one. Cobra was a critical failure. Shocker. Review aggregation websites Rotten Tomatoes respectively gave the film a score of 13% based on reviews from 16 critics. Much criticism was aimed at its plotting and dialogue, which received his...
Whoa, 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 whoa. One of the best lines out of cinematic history came out of Cobra. Come on. You know what it is. I don't have to say.
Yeah, we're not going to spoil it, but you guys need to watch it.
Y'all know what it is.
If you've seen it,
and by that I'm not serious, but it is one of the most iconic Stallone lines. I mean, he really wasn't a catchphrase guy like Schwarzenegger was, but this was one of his better ones.
The criticism was seen as merely rehashing common action film tropes. The level of violence, even after re-editing, was also considered gratuitous. Cobra was nominated for 6 Razzie Awards, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, Sylvester Stallone, Worst Actress, Brigitte Nielsen, Worst Supporting Actor, and Worst New Star, both for Brian Thompson, and Worst Screenplay. Cobra debuted at #1 at the box office and was a huge financial success with a Memorial Weekend debut of $15.6 million. It eventually went on to gross $160 million, over 6 times its estimated $25 million budget. I'm assuming those numbers are inflated for modern numbers because, again, this was taken from Wikipedia. So after initial X rating by the MPAA, the movie was heavily cut and received an R rating. It was released in theaters with a running time of 84 minutes, approximately 50 minutes shorter than the first cut, and 30 to 40 minutes shorter than the director's cut.
Wow. Is there an original cut somewhere available?
Actually, I was looking that up after I found that fact, and I guess there isn't actually any...
Really?
There's no director's cut available. I guess there's like a bootleg of it out there somewhere, but
I'd like to see the X-rated
the
cut.
timestamps and crap on it.
I'd still like to see that, just to see what they cut, what they deemed X-rated.
But you got to remember, this was the '80s, and this was also the time of what was the
MPPA?
Well, not the MPPA, but the parents group there that Tipper Gore was in charge of. The
parents music resource thing.
Oh
right?
yeah, okay, yeah. I could remember, but yeah.
Remember that we got all up in arms because they made us. They made them put labels saying explicit blah 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 and stuff, and we were screaming that was censorship back then.
Yeah.
Over something as trivial as a sticker.
That's right.
Just warning us that it's like.
There might be explicit lyrics in this album.
Anthrax wrote a song about it.
Yeah. Find it if you can. I'm sure it's on Spotify or something somewhere. So, Pete, you got anything to add to Cobra?
Well, it's on my list for sure. So, like I said, the line, I mean, you're the disease and I'm the cure. Come on. That's cool. It's cheesy, yeah, but in the 80s, it was cool. Everything was cooler back in the 80s. As much as we've matured and, now we can look on it and be like, oh, God, that was awful. It was still cool. It was fun. I loved the movie. I thought it was one of my favorite Stallone films for a long, long time. I did see it in the theater. I always thought I think it was cool. I think what I really liked about it, of course, you got to remember, what year was that? 88? 87?
I can't. 86?
86? A lot of them came out in 86 because I think that's when Masters of the Universe came out in like 88.
87.
87.
Masters of the Universe.
87. But I like that guy's knife. He had those cool knives with the spikes on it.
Yeah.
I always remember that. And I remember that scene in his car. That's what I liked. I loved his car. It had those big moon caps over the hubs. I always wanted to get some of those for my truck. It would have looked so badass. I had a silver Chevy 3/4 ton. That would have looked so cool. It was low to the ground. But I could never find any of those. But they look cool. I thought it was an okay movie. It was,
It's one of those. It's mindless entertainment.
It's not First Blood, but
no,
it's
it's not Rocky. Definitely not First Blood.
Yeah.
So what's your number 3?
My number 3 is The Hero and the Terror.
Ooh, good pick.
I was genuinely kind of disturbed by this movie when I first watched it. I remember watching, I think I saw this in the theater. I think I saw all of these in the theater, except for my top number 1. And it's very dark. It's got really creepy villain in it, who played by Jack O'Halloran, who, if any of you don't know who that is, he was General Zod's right-hand man there. I think his name was Non in the original Superman movies with Christopher Reeve, Superman 1 and 2.
Oh, yeah, I know. The big tall, bald, semi-bald
the mute
dude.
guy,
Yeah.
the big mute guy,
Yeah.
which is weird because I don't think he spoke in Hero and the Terror either. So he was very good at playing mute psychopaths. I always thought it was a great movie, and one of Chuck Norris's best, if not his best movie ever, which he did receive a lot of acclaim for. As far as his acting chops went, I think it was one of his best. You know, it wasn't it wasn't an action film to begin.
No, it's more of a psychological thriller.
Yeah,
if I remember
it's
right.
a horror
It's been
thriller
a long,
cop movie.
Long time since
Yeah,
I've seen that one.
because the Terror, as they called him, that was his nickname. I mean, he would kidnap these women and snap their necks, and he'd keep all the bodies, and it was a little disturbing. But I like the movie because of those dark undertones. I thought it was different for a Chuck Norris film.
Well, he's
not
known for those types
no,
of films.
I thought it was a good.
guy.
I thought it was a good stretch, and there are some cool little facts that I did find on Wikipedia about this. But it has a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Which I saw that and I was like, that's got to be a typo, but no, it's true. A 0 rating for Rotten Tomatoes, and it only grossed like 1.84 million nationwide.
Wow.
In its first weekend, and it was like 12th place in its release. It wasn't a box office hit by any means, especially for Chuck Norris, and this was in his heyday. So this
was right around, because it was right around the same time. It's like Missing in Action, Lone Wolf McQuade.
Yeah, it was. It was right there.
Invasion
Lone Wolf McQuade
USA.
that was my fifth one I didn't get to watch.
Invasion USA. Yeah.
No, Lone Wolf
McQuade.
Lone
Wolf McQuade, but that's actually not a canon film.
Really?
I always that would have been my number one, because I love Lone Wolf McQuade.
Yeah.
When I was looking at the list of canon films, because when we were talking about doing this episode, I was like, I need to go look, because this is the thing. Canon films were so prevalent back in the 80s video store day that a lot of the lower budget, smaller companies, I just always assumed were canon films. Yeah. And Chuck Norris did so many films for canon that I always assumed that Lone Wolf McQuade was a canon film, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
I think it was actually put out by Sylvester Stallone's Carolco.
Really?
Think, yeah.
That's cool.
I think I'd have to look to be sure.
Well, anyway, Hero of the Terror, I didn't really get to the plot about it. I mean, but Chuck Norris plays a cop. His name's Danny O'Brien. Canon original film. Original name there, Danny O'Brien. But he works in Los Angeles, and he's been trying to apprehend this guy. His name's Simon Moon, played by Jack O'Halloran, also known as the Terror. He's been killing women, snapping their necks, and keeping them in his lair in an abandoned movie theater. Well, anyways, Chuck Norris's character finds him, and they get into a fight, and he slips and falls and knocks himself unconscious. And people think that Chuck Norris, beat him up and knocked him out, and so he's a hero. And so Mr. Moon goes to prison. Well, he escapes, and people never heard from him again for years. He disappeared for years, and it's always bothered Chuck Norris, I guess, for a long time. And he had nightmares about this and all this crap, and then he pops back up, and people keep disappearing, and then he finds him living under an old abandoned pier down by the waterfront, and eventually kills him. It's not a real complex plot by any means. You just go on Wikipedia and read about it if you want, but check out the movie. I think it's one of Chuck Norris's best films, and this was in August 88 when this was released, and that was just about when he was winding down. His movies were winding down. The heyday of Chuck Norris was kind of, coming to an end. But
he had a 4 or 5 year run there.
Oh, yeah.
Where he was like
mid-80s. He was there.
Yeah.
It was him, Stallone, Schwarzenegger.
Pretty much, yeah, for the main action guys.
So that's my number 3 pick, Hero and the Terror.
I don't have a lot to add for that, because it's been a long time since I've seen it, but it was kind of funny because I think it was probably less than a year ago you and I were actually talking about that movie.
Yeah, because it was just on TV,
yeah,
it was just on TV, and I think it was on like a free HBO weekend or something, and I DVR'd it and watched it, and I was like, geez, I forgot how good this movie was.
Yeah. And that's actually, it's right up there. I remember as being, I think, one of the top probably 3 or 4 best Chuck Norris films.
Oh yeah.
My number 3 is 1987's The Barbarians, directed by Ruggiero Deodato. Runtime 87 minutes, rated R, stars David Paul, Peter Paul, and Richard Lynch, also known as the poor man's David Bowie. I watched this one on VHS. The synopsis: 2 twin brothers seek revenge from the warlord who massacred their tribe and captured them when they were small children. I'm going to get this out of the way before I even get going. This one has never been a good movie. I've always recognized it as being cheesy, but I'll be damned if I can't help but love it. There's always been something about this film that clicked for me. I can't tell what that is, but it's there. Out of all the Cannon films on my list, this is the one I've watched the most in recent memory. I have a very bad VHS style transfer on DVD. This one has never really gotten a true DVD or restorative Blu-ray release, and I really wish that would change because I would buy it in a heartbeat. Out of all the low-budget sword and sorcery, Conan the Barbarian knockoffs of the early to mid-'80s, this one was always my favorite. I couldn't get enough of these films as a pre-teenager, younger teenager. I watched the hell out of any of them I could get my hands on. They were always cheesy but fun. This one I rented over and over from the video store. I thought the Barbarian brothers were badass, and I always laughed at the corny one-liners and brotherly arguments throughout the film. Sure, it was bad, but that didn't matter. I had fun. Oh yeah, and there was plenty of random nudity to pique a young man's fancy. I could still throw this one on today and enjoy it for what it is. Is it a good movie? Not at all. But it's short, fun, and gloriously cheesy. Bad acting, cheesy fighting scenes, corny effects, and everything else you would expect out of a film of this type. One thing about this film I always loved and thought kicked ass was the score. The music is wonderful, and I still think it's amazing. This isn't a film everyone will like or appreciate, and I absolutely 100% understand that. For me, it always is going to hold a special place and be one I enjoy. I gave it a 5 out of 5, and that's probably really, really, really generous. The average IMDb rating is actually a 4.9 out of 10. And oddly enough, there is 0 interesting facts I can find about this film. So that one's pretty short. I've never watched it.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, we'll watch it sometime and you'll laugh.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Oh, so, I guess we're on to my number 2.
Number 2, yeah.
Number 2, and this was hard. This I fought long and hard for this to be in the number 1 spot, but it just after a while, and after I watched it, and then I watched my number 1 pick, I was like, no, I'll throw this as a solid number 2. But I think I watched this movie more than any other Cannon film ever, and it is 1983's Revenge of the Ninja.
Ooh.
Yes, starring Sho Kosugi and his son. Actually, I believe played in it too. His son, I think his name was Kane, or might have been in the movie. But it is directed by Sam Furstenberg. Never heard of that, but and of course produced by Golan Globus, as with most Cannon films. And Sho Kosugi, Keith Vitale was in it, Virgil Fry, Kane Shikuzi. I can't talk. It was the second installment of the Ninja trilogy, I guess you could call it, that Cannon put out, and the best of all 3. The first one was iffy at best. This one was good. Actually had kind of a decent story to follow. Way better than Ninja 3: The Domination. That movie's just horrible.
I remember that's the one with the female ninja, right?
Yes, Lucinda Dickey, who starred in the Breaking movies, and she's a horrible actress as well. But she was very, very easy on the eyes back then, and she could sure as hell dance and fight. She did a lot of her own choreography and stunts in that movie, I believe. So anyway, brief story, his family gets killed by a bunch of ninjas over in Japan, so he decides to move to America with his son and mother for a better life. And he opens up a little art gallery and has this little collection of dolls and stuff, and he has his friend over in America, and they open this shop up. Well, just so happens the kid finds drugs in one of the dolls, and it turns out that his American business partner, was smuggling heroin in the dolls for the mob. And finds out, and then he tries to kill the rest of his family, and they do. They end up killing the grandmother, and so he has to take revenge. And he had been a ninja previously. Well, I guess once you're a ninja, you're always a ninja. But once a ninja, always a ninja.
I'm a retired ninja. I'm no longer ninja.
Well, he was. He didn't ninja anymore. He'd put that behind him. He'd trying to lead a peaceful life in America, trying to better himself. Well, and then there's always some asshole that has to come out of the woodwork and make you don that mask and sword, and he took it upon himself to kill all the bad guys. And then, of course, it turns out that his partner is actually a ninja as well. Secretly, he was a ninja, an American ninja. So
in London.
Los Angeles. Or maybe, no, I think it's Salt Lake City, actually. I think it takes place in Salt Lake City, if I remember correctly. Hold on just a second. Yep, Salt Lake City. Weird, but I love the movie. I was into ninjas, of course. I mean, early 80s. So, I was in junior high, and ninjas were all the rage. And this movie was one of the best, ninja movies out there. If I wanted to get any type of martial arts fix, it was Kung Fu Theater on Sunday afternoons on USA Network, which was the bomb.
I remember a lot of movies on that, but I don't remember actually what any of them were called. Yeah. I just remember a lot of random.
A lot of them were retitled and rebranded as new movies too.
Yeah,
and they used to cut a bunch of them together, which was kind of strange. But Revenge of the Ninja was the coolest. It had some of the coolest deaths in it. I think there was one scene in it, if I remember right. He had a mouthful of little darts and just spit them in a guy's face. It was so cool. But that was actually my first introduction to ninjas, because then I went back and then I saw the first ninja movie, and I was like, oh, this one's kind of a piece of crap. But in the good guy in that, Shokasugi actually in the first movie played the bad guy. And
so he turned over a new leaf.
Yeah, he did. And it has nothing to do with the previous movie, and Ninja 3 has nothing to do with the other movies. They're all different movies. So, and coincidentally, the good ninja in the first ninja movie, he was a white guy, and he was a white ninja. So his gi and everything was white. So if you're ever wondering where they got the idea for Storm Shadow for G.I. Joe, probably there.
Yeah.
So. And I loved that movie as a kid, and I remembered most of the dialogue while I was watching. I was sitting there going, "Oh yeah, I know all these lines." I watched that movie a lot.
Yeah,
it was like a once a week, maybe twice a week thing for me to watch that. But that's my number 2.
Nice. Well, my number 2 was actually the last film that I watched out of my top 5, because I actually kind of had a hard time tracking down a copy of it that wasn't ungodly expensive, because I didn't really want to pay a ton for it. And that's 1986's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yeah.
Directed by Tobe Hooper, 101-minute runtime, unrated, stars Dennis Hopper, Caroline Williams, Jim Seidow. I watched that on Blu-ray. Synopsis: chainsaw-wielding maniac Leatherface is up to his cannibalistic ways once again, along with the rest of his twisted clan, including the equally disturbing Chop Top. This time, the masked killer has set his sights on a pretty disc jockey, Vanita Stretch Brock, who teams up with Texas lawman Lefty Enright to battle the psychopath and his family deep within their lair, a macabre abandoned amusement park. It's probably been 7 or 8 years at least since the last time I watched this. It was also, like I said, the last of my top 5 canon films. For no particular reason other than I had to wait until I could find a cheap copy. I don't even really know what to say about this one. While the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just disturbing on a deep, visceral level, probably one of the most disturbing movies ever, in my honest opinion. This one is just bonkers and weird. Everything about the performances, from Dennis Hopper's character, Lefty, to the Sawyer family, chopped up, Bubba, Cook, and Grandpa, is just bizarre. That's what makes this film both work and go a little too over the top. Then again, it is a Cannon film, so I'd expect nothing less. You've got some great Tom Savini makeup effects, which only adds to things and makes the film better. The only one in the film that's really playing it level-headed is Stretch. There are actually some funny parts in this one, but to me it's more ironic comedy than laugh out loud. When it all boils down to it, I'd forgotten how batshit crazy and weird this film is. It's actually a lot less gory than I remember it being, but there's still one scene that skeeves me out every single time I see the film involving RJ. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's when they're in the amusement park. For those who haven't seen it, it's kind of nasty. The weirdness of the film isn't even so much the story, it's just the whole premise and the way it fits together. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of Italian cinema, but with a more Americanized twist. It's really hard to explain, it just kind of is what it is. I absolutely get why some people don't like this one, but I enjoy the hell out of it. Is it a film I'd throw on often? Nope. But every time I do, I'm reminded why I like it and enjoy the wacky ride it takes on. On a final note, this has one of the coolest rip-off posters I have ever seen. It's mimicking the Breakfast Club poster, but with the Sawyer clan, and it perfectly sums up the odd nature of this film. My rating was a 7 out of 10. The average IMDb rating is a 5.6 out of 10. And I have some interesting facts taken from Wikipedia. The film was shot for a budget of $4.7 million. After it was submitted to the MPAA in the United States, the film received an X rating, prompting the filmmakers to release it as unrated. However, TV previews, the theatrical trailers, and even posters for the film displayed the written statement, "Due to the nature of the film, no one under 17 will be admitted." The film was banned in Australia for 20 years. An uncut version was released on VHS by Warner Home Video in New Zealand in 1987, but could also be found illegally, as the box proudly stated, in some Australian video stores at the time. The New Zealand VHS cassette has become very rare. In 2000, an unofficial VHS release was issued to retailers throughout Australia. This was done so illegally by a duplicating house and without the knowledge of the OFLC. When news of the illegal copies leaked, a number of retailers were raided for possessing infringing copies. The duplicate house was similarly raided by federal customs. So some, interesting tidbits there. Yeah.
Wow. I gotta watch that again. So much fun.
So
okay.
we're on to Pete's number one. I'm interested to find out what his number one is.
My number one, this movie will always hold a special place in my heart, and that is 1984's Break-In. Hey, 1984. I was breakdancing. We all were. We used to do it. There's a whole bunch of us that used to do it. But I'll tell you, I love this movie, and I still to this day will watch this movie, and I'll never turn it off. And it's bad. The acting's bad. Of course it is. It's a Cannon film. But it's one of the best Cannon films. Definitely in the top 5 Cannon films. Maybe even number 1 grossing. Maybe
we'll get to that at the end of the film. We're gonna pound you with some facts.
We're gonna beat you to death with some knowledge.
You're gonna get some learning in.
Yeah. Well, it was a 1984 release, directed by Joel Silberg. I believe he went on to do a bunch of other stuff too. And if you don't know what the movie's about, it's about this jazz dancer. She's from a well-to-do family. She's a professional jazz dancer, and she meets these 2 street dancers. Their names Turbo and Ozone, which is probably 2 of the coolest names ever. played by their real names are just as weird as their movie characters' names. But I mean, one of them, his real name was shoot, now I can't remember. This is why I should do notes. But anyway, like TJ's got notes. But anyway, Turbo knows, and she meets them, becomes friends because she's interested in their style of dancing, and she wants something different. She's not fulfilled by her dancing career, so she teams up with these street kids to show her how to dance hip hop style and break dance, and then they end up having a competition with other local dance troupe, and they get their asses handed to them, and then they finally decide to bring her in, and because this other team brought in a girl, so they brought her in, and they incorporated...
For 2,000 kids, does this sound even remotely familiar to a series that you guys all love?
Right.
About cheerleaders.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's pretty much, it's a breakdancing version of Bring It On. So, and, well, of course, they win, and then she wants to do an audition, and they do an audition after they win this dance competition for some musical or whatever it was, I believe, and they incorporate, of course, the breakdancing style into the jazz, and they win over the hearts of the judges, and they go on to dance and a great many things, which you will learn in the sequel, Breaking 2.
Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo. And
so every time I hear of a sequel, if anybody's been around me, I always incorporate it. It's like, It 2. Electric Boogaloo.
Now that's cool because I God damn, I'm gonna start laughing my ass off. Oh, where is it? I did have this as a note here somewhere. Popular culture. Okay, well, anyways, another interesting fact about this: Ice-T was in the movie. He played a club DJ in the movie. An MC, and even he referred to the character and his performance as being whack, which is like the big term in the movie. Everything's whack in this movie. Everything's whack, which means it sucks.
So if you have never seen this film, you absolutely need to track it down. I haven't seen it in forever, but I remember for some stupid reason, Rad, BMX Bandits, and Breaking being on about the same-ish time.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the hell out of the three of those because they were on HBO like every other hour.
And all of them dressed the same.
Yes.
We all dressed the same back then. We all wore the same stupid bandanas with the Japanese symbols on them and the parachute pants and like...
I was sick, so I didn't. But
the sleeveless shirts with all the zippers on them and the hats and our cuffs of our pants were bandanaed up into our sneakers and... Yeah, that's pretty much. But yeah, the Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo thing that TJ does, that is called a snow clone, by the way. It's a popular reference used by Breaking 2. I'm going to read, this is from Wikipedia, I'm going to read directly off the page. Breakin' and its sequel, Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, have had a resurgence in popular media and as people have begun to remember, mock, and praise the film over 20 years later, with the sequel subtitle in particular becoming a snow clone. Wow, I don't even know what that name is. Pejorative nickname to denote an archetypal sequel. So, like when somebody says, hey, I'm making a sequel to my movie, we're calling it, let's say I made a movie called Domination, so we're making Domination 2. Electric Boogaloo. So that's what that means. So when somebody says, hey, did you see, something 2, Train Spotting 2, Electric Boogaloo, that's what it is. It's actually a thing in pop culture, and I did not know that till I looked at this up on Wikipedia. Because TJ is famous for saying this all the time. It's just so funny. That's another reason why I kind of wanted to do this whole canon film thing, because as soon as he said this, like, oh yeah, Electric Boogaloo. It's such a TJ thing. But
and like 90% of the people I say that to look at me with the dumbest look on their face. But the people who get it usually bust out laughing. So
it was released on May 4th, 1984. Ran 87 minutes, which actually kind of long. Well, for the movie, it doesn't seem that long, but budget $1.2 million. Box office gross $38.7 million.
Pretty impressive.
Now that's pretty damn good. So it beat out 16 Candles.
Wow.
And 16 Candles was in 1,240 screens.
And this was
Breakin' was in 1,069.
So to put that in perspective, that was also right about the kickoff of the whole Brat Pack John Hughes mania.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yep. It ranked number 1 in the box office, earning $6 million. By the end of its run, the film grossed $38.6 million domestically.
And that's theater totals. I'm curious. Like, this is the thing with a lot of the Cannon films, and we'll get into this a little later, but I would really like to see what the actual, like, home rental totals and stuff were. Like, how much money was made from these films and home rentals, or estimated home rentals and all that sort of thing. Because a lot of these films really weren't big released films in the theater.
Yeah. The acting was horrible, of course. You have 3 non-actors. They're all dancers.
Yeah.
And 2 of them had little to no experience being actors whatsoever. And one of them had a little bit. It might have been her foray into acting. I'm not quite sure about that. But the acting's horrible, stiff, and awkward as you watch the movie. But it more than makes up for it with the dance sequences and the choreography. And especially...
Oh, the dancing is badass.
The dancing's badass.
And
and that's what the whole movie's about, though, is the dancing. So... and then, of course, watching it later on, I realized how bad the acting actually was. And I think the scene... What was the scene? The scene that I always loved in that was the solo scene with, his name's Turbo, or Boogaloo Shrimp, if you want to call him by his real street name. And he's sweeping outside of this store that he works at. And he's doing the solo dance thing with a broom. Which is awesome. So cool.
Awesome, yeah.
It actually is so cool. I mean, the broom's kind of suspended on a wire or whatever. You can't really see it, but it's a cool little dance thing that he did, and that actually right there is kind of worth the price of admission.
Now I really want to watch that again.
It's great.
So
Breakin's
long.
great. You just got to get past the acting, and like I said, Ice-T's in it briefly. He's whack in that movie. According to him, he's whack.
He's whacked.
So, yeah, you whack, man. That's all I say in that movie. That's whack. And Breaking 2 was just an abomination that I just couldn't bear myself to watch more than twice. And
I probably watched it more than that because I didn't know any better, and I was like,
well,
6,
yeah. Well, hey, look, Breaking 2's on. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool, that's mindless.
So
I'm waiting for my ride. I'm just going to watch
I got an
Breaking
hour
2.
to kill. Yeah, exactly.
Electric Boogaloo. By the way, the Electric Boogaloo is a dance, I think. I can't remember.
It's the cousin to the Electric Slide. I don't know. So my number 1 is also from 1984, but that is Missing in Action.
Nice.
Directed by Joseph Zito, has a 101-minute runtime, rated R, stars Chuck Norris, M. Emmett Walsh, David Trask. I watched this on Blu-ray. Synopsis: Colonel James Braddock survives a brutal stint in a Vietnamese POW camp, but he believes that even after the war ends, enemy forces are still secretly holding American men captive. Eventually, he is tapped by the president to go overseas and search for U.S. soldiers who went missing years ago. Once in Saigon, Braddock learns that his suspicions are correct. So he teams up with reckless fellow veteran Tuck and stages a violent rescue mission in the jungle. I grew up watching this film on HBO. I had a recorded copy on VHS along with Red Dawn and Lone Wolf McQuade that I wore out from watching. While I've picked up both Red Dawn and Lone Wolf McQuade in various formats over the years, I've never snagged a copy of Missing in Action. I don't know why, but it just sort of slipped to the back of my mind about even looking for it. I think for a while it may have even been hard to find or unavailable. Like so many movies I grew up with and watched over and over, I think sometimes they become so ingrained we almost don't need to watch them. They're just kind of there in the deep recesses of our mind, and we occasionally pull nuggets of information about them out. When I was going through my list of canon films for the special, this one jumped out at me more than any of the others on the list. It has been 20 years since the last time I saw this, maybe even closer to 25. All I know, it's been a while. With that in mind, I was kind of nervous about revisiting it after so many years. I didn't know if it was going to hold up. Was it going to be cheesy and unwatchable? I mean, it is a Cannon film. I know that's happened on a few occasions with films I grew up loving. I did manage to find a copy for super cheap on Blu-ray. The DVD was actually more expensive for some reason. So I went with the better transfer. Why the hell not? I'm happy to say this film still holds up. While there are some glaring flaws and plot holes, it's still an action-filled punch that you don't see with today's action films. I dare say this embodies just about everything there was to love about 80s action and Cannon films. While I realize now this was cashing in on the Rambo craze, it certainly was one of the best copycat films to come out of that era. While Lone Wolf McQuade is still my favorite Chuck Norris film, this is a damn close second. What sets this one above a lot of the other films of this type is the fact there's actually a decent script and story to go with it. It's not just an all-out war film. It certainly is above most Cannon films as far as quality goes. Glad to have this in my collection. I'll certainly throw it on when I'm in the mood for a nostalgia trip. I think honestly it still holds up. Even if you haven't seen it before, if you like your 80s film gung-ho, oozing with badass machismo, then you'll want to revisit this one and give it a shot. I think you'll enjoy. My rating may be a little high out of simple nostalgia, but hey, for what it is, it's a damn enjoyable film. My rating is a 7 out of 10. The average IMDb was a 5.4. And some fun facts. The concept for the film originated from a story treatment written by James Cameron, which is probably why the story is one of the better ones for a Cannon film. In 1983, the treatment was for Rambo: First Blood Part 2 that was floating around Hollywood at the time. This explains the similar plot lines between Rambo and MIA. Representatives from Cannon Group claim to have been inspired by Cameron's script and subsequently produced and released the first two Missing Action films 2 months before the release of Rambo, in order to avoid copyright violation lawsuits. Despite the overwhelmingly negative reception from critics, the film was a commercial success and has become one of Chuck Norris's most popular films. It was also Norris's first film with the Cannon Group. The film was popular at the box office, one of the most successful Cannon ever made by Cannon. It earned over $10 million in rentals in the U.S., resulting in a profit to Cannon of $6.5 million on the basis of its U.S. release alone. Missing in Action 2 was filmed back-to-back with Missing in Action and was actually set to be released first before the producers changed their minds. So that's kind of a fun fact anyway, yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, you got anything to add about that one?
Missing in Action?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely my favorite Chuck Norris film. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I wasn't a big fan of Missing in Action 2 so
I didn't
much.
care for 3 was okay, but 2 I didn't like 2. 2 was actually a prequel to but 3 was okay, but from what I remember, but it really wasn't good. It was you could watch
I just remember the sound effects were really bad. That was the only thing that like really annoyed me about that movie.
Yeah.
And I haven't watched it in I'll dare say 20 years, maybe.
Yeah, that like I said,
Still not as bad as Masters of the Universe.
That was my first time viewing it in quite a while. I did have a couple honorable mentions, which I didn't get a chance to watch either one, and that was Kickboxer and Invasion USA. Invasion USA is basically a Red Dawn ripoff with adults. I mean, come on, let's face it. And Kickboxer is just fun. It's not a good movie, but it is fun. So to kind of close out with some interesting facts before we wrap this up, is the Cannon Group was an American group of companies, including Cannon Films, which produced a distinctive line of low to medium budget films from 1967 to 1994.
Right.
The extensive group also owned, amongst others, a large international cinema chain and a video film company that invested heavily in the video market, buying the international rights to several classic film libraries. So what?
Wow.
We're gonna tell you what the top 20 grossing Cannon films were of all time.
Oh, I had one thing to add about, well, my honorable mention.
Okay.
My honorable mention is Another Van Damme flick, by the way, and that's Bloodsport.
Oh, that's a great. That was actually, I think, his first one with Cannon, maybe.
Yep, and based on a true story, and which is
that's another one I haven't seen in ages.
But that's probably. I've seen that one quite a few times as well too. I'd actually like to see that be remade.
Yeah, I know they remade Kickboxer with the dude from Guardians of the Galaxy playing Tom Poe.
Yep.
Holy cow, I can't. Dave Bautista. And this is something I wanted to mention too about Cannon films. The Cannon films you love, I think, honestly, are probably depending on what age you are and the ones you saw when they come out.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of Pete's a few years older than me, so some of the ones he really likes were ones I never really was pounded over the head with.
Right, and I was, because
I wasn't quite allowed to watch some of those yet when they come out.
And a lot of mine I saw in the theater. So it was... and like I said, we were inundated by these movies constantly.
Yeah, they were part of the culture of us growing up in the VHS video store rental.
I'll never forget when you told me about the Electric Boogaloo documentary. I was like, I have to watch that, and I did, and it was great.
It definitely.
It's long too.
It's like 2.5 hours long, but it's well worth watching. It is fascinating. So. It is Electric Boogaloo, The Wild Untold Story of Cannon Films. Find that if you can. I think it might still be on Netflix, but I'm not 100% sure. But we're going to I'm going to tell you what the top 20 grossing Cannon films.
Let's do this.
Mind you, these are all from the 80s, so if you kind of inflated the price, of what the gross was now for today's prices, they would be a lot higher.
Remember, we were easily amused back then, too.
So number one is Breaking with a gross of $38 million.
$38 million.
Missing in Action with a gross of $22 million. Joe, which I've never heard of.
I have no idea what that's
$19 million. The Delta Force. $17 million. Invasion USA, $17 million. There's a lot of Chuck Norris movies on here. Masters of the Universe, $17 million.
No, that's got to be wrong.
And I can't believe neither one of us brought this one up because it is one of the most batshit crazy movies ever. Death Wish 3 at $16 million. King Solomon's Mines at $15 million. Kickboxer, $14 million. Another Chuck Norris movie, Firewalker, at $11 million. Bloodsport at $11 million. Missing in Action 2, The Beginning, $10 million. American Ninja, $10 million. Cyborg.
Michael Dudikoff. I didn't even have a Michael Dudikoff film in my.
I'm surprised because I remember that was one of the first people you mentioned.
Yeah, and American Ninja. I want to say I saw that in the theater too.
I think there was like 8 American Ninja sequels.
I almost threw Firebase Glory on my list too, and but I couldn't find anywhere to watch it.
So Cyborg at $10 million, Murphy's Law at $9 million, which I don't know what that one is. Bolero at $8 million, no clue. Salsa, the motion picture, at $8 million. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 at $8 million. Runaway Train, which I've actually heard a lot of people say is an amazing action film, and I've never seen it, so I kind of really want to track that down. That grossed $7 million. And number 20, Ninja 3, The Domination.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that. That and Masters of the Universe. Masters of the Universe should at least have done that. But Ninja 3? God, that was awful.
And then when you get down, because I believe on that list it was actually like the top 75, and they're all within like $100,000, $200,000 of one another.
Shoksugi wore an eye patch in that one, I believe, too. Was that the one where he had the eye patch? I think he had, and he had like a dart hidden up under the eye patch. But I don't know. It's been forever since I've seen the movie, and it sucks so bad.
So yeah, that pretty much wraps up our Cannon film special. Thanks Pete for coming down, and this was fun talking about.
No problem.
I knew we'd probably laugh a lot, and we
could laugh a lot. We could do this all night. And we could harp on these movies, and we have at great lengths at my house. I'm sure
we do this often when we're not recording, so this was a good precipice for making this happen.
Sometimes I think those are better than when we kind of actually prep for this stuff.
Yeah, when you just do them off the cuff and get
Yeah.
into the deep discussions. Oh, absolutely.
I didn't really do much prep, but I'm just kind of like reading things off my phone. I didn't take notes.
I'm so used to doing these now. I take
Well,
notes
yeah.
because I forget. But the so yeah, real quick, I'd like to thank my sponsors, the Maine Cannababes, for being awesome as usual.
Ew!
Go to maincannababes.com to find out more information about them. If you enjoy Average Joe's Drive-In, please hit us up on Facebook at Average Joe's Drive-In Podcast, Instagram at Thomas Washburn Jr., Twitter, TWJ Author. You can also find my .com at thomaswashburnjr.com. That's basically a link to everything. It has a plethora of information. I love that word, plethora. It's a great word.
That and cornucopia.
Cornucopia, interested ecophobia. But randomness, you know. But one of the other things, if you want to support the show, you can go to Amazon. I have my books for sale. All the money I make off my books, which isn't a whole hell of a lot, I'm trying to put back into the show to upgrade and, you know, purchase some different software for recording and a few other things and upgrading, which is kind of expensive. So if you want to help me out, you can purchase my books in Kindle and paperback format. They're pretty cheap. Also, if you have a Kindle Unlimited or Amazon Prime, you can read my books for free, and I get paid when you read them. So it helps me out. You don't have to actually pay any money, and it helps me out. So if you want to do that, please do, and I would generally appreciate the awesome help. And again, I'll let you guys know when Pete and I figure out what the hell we're doing for next month's special. We'll figure it out. We've got
Breaking
a little time.
2, Electric Boogaloo.
This is just going to turn into the Canon Films monthly.
I think we're going to sit here and talk about TJ's awesome VHS collection.
I've grown a lot since the last time Pete was here. But yeah, so kids, I want to leave you with a quick reminder. Remember, opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one, and I will see you sexy animals on the flip side.
See ya!
It's intermission. Rise and stretch time. Time to refresh yourself and visit our snack bar. Got a yen for hot popcorn? Your favorite soft drinks are sparkling cold. The juicy Frank sizzling hot. There's delicious coffee, freshly brewed, and all kinds of ice cream and candy to tempt you. Showtime will be announced loud and clear to get you back to your car in time. So stretch your legs. Come to the snack bar now.